Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well. Can you believe it's been a year already? It's crazy, right? You know, time flies. If I'm completely honest, I was almost gonna skip this video because I don't feel like I have much to talk about, you know. My template hasn't changed all that much. There are a few differences here and there, but I figured, I don't know, like it has become a yearly Christmas tradition for some of you, and I couldn't really let you down. So I bought some new stuff, and also a bit of a change of scenery, as you can see. Yeah, it's the same old room, but I just kind of turned some things around. I got a bit bored of the look, and unfortunately I couldn't fit the Christmas tree, but I did try my best to create some Christmas vibes. We've got the fairy lights, we've got our little reindeer friend. It's not quite the same as having a Christmas tree, but you know, this was the best I could do. Enough chit chat, let's jump straight into the video. Actually, no, let's not do that. I have to do a bit of a shameless plug, because it's only a couple of days left to get my course, 20th Century Orchestral Writing, at half price. Yeah, so this is the best deal of the year, so don't buy libraries, get my course. All right, now that all that is out of the way, I think we should start with the demo and kind of do a more general chat, you know, on the mix. The mix is very different compared to the previous years, and then just go back to the empty template at the end for reviewing specific sounds. All right, so here's the project. I'm gonna grab my headphones so that I can listen to it with you. And sorry, quick interruption again. I apologize for being so unorganized today. I forgot to mention that, of course, you can grab this template on my Patreon, yeah, alongside the demo, you know, the project files for the demo. All right, so here it goes. Enjoy. As you can see, my template doesn't look very different from the previous years, but I think for once it does sound different. Yeah, And this is mostly due to the different mic mixes, really, and a couple of plugins here and there. But also I kind of simplified the whole setup quite a bit, you know, particularly when it comes to sample modeling. I tried a couple of things this year. I bought a couple of plugins. At some point I bought Berlin Studio. We'll talk about that later, maybe. And I did experiment with that a little bit, but I found it, I don't know, it's great. Like, it's a fantastic plugin, and I do still have it here on the tuba. Yep, just quite literally only the tuba, and I have it on some percussion instruments as well. Where would those be? I think I've got it on the low perc, as you can see. Yeah, basically just to add a little bit more ambience, essentially, to simulate the surround mics, as you can see from the interface. But generally speaking, it's a bit of a simpler mix. You can see that sample modeling no longer has its own output. Everything goes straight into the brass, essentially. And up until a couple of days ago, this was a bit of a last minute buy. Yeah. And I don't know if it's gonna stay or not, if I'm completely honest. I do kind of like it, but I don't know. I just kind of liked, in general, the idea of having a simpler template. I had a trillion plugins with some very complex EQ curves, and if I open these right now, you'll see, so this is the trumpets, for example. You see that this is quite a bit simpler than what I had before, and it kind of achieves a similar effect. Also, I changed the preset for Seventh Heaven. Yeah, I'm just basically using the studio file for all of the French horns and the trumpets, and I brought back the trombones into the template, which were not here last year. I do like them still. I mean, like, I don't use them a lot, but I use them for specific stuff, like mostly accompaniment for like warm, brassy, American, you know, paddy kind of sounds that I cannot really achieve with anything else that I have going on. Yeah. And in terms of cinematic studio brass, it's mostly the same stuff. Yeah. It's literally the same as before. I think maybe last year I had the room mic instead of the mix mic. I'm not sure. But overall, last year's template was sounding much larger than what we have right now. Part of the reason is some of the projects I worked on this year kind of made me want to dial back a bit of the ambience, a bit of the room. So you'll see that, for example, if I open the strings spot mics and some of the room, I switched off the main because I think it was adding a little bit too much of woofy air around the instrument and kind of making them sound too big. I kind of like this mix, but I do realize that it's quite a bit thinner than what we had before. I don't necessarily mind it because I think it blends very well with drier instruments. For example, some of the drum kits, you know, whenever I'm using drums or if I'm using some solo instruments like some of the woodwinds that we heard at the beginning, you know, it's kind of much easier to blend all the instruments together, you know, and make them feel like a cohesive ensemble if we don't have that massive room, you know, to begin with. If I'm to record some guitars, you know, acoustic guitars or electric guitars, for example, in this room, it's much easier to blend them, you know, or just kind of put them into the project if we don't have this huge orchestra sitting way in the back, and then you've got the drums in the front and the percussion in the front and the guitars and the bass. So basically, that was the whole idea behind making a mix that is a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller. I don't necessarily mind it, but there are moments sometimes when you do feel like I don't know, it could be a little bit beefier. For example, on spiccatos, let me just play you this part. You see what I'm talking about. So basically, to solve this issue, what I ended up doing is a bit of I don't know, maybe I am overcomplicating things a little bit over here. As you can see on the left, actually, let me pull it from the mixer so you can see it a little bit more clearly. We've got a channel EQ, nothing too crazy. Then we've got fresh air that adds a little bit of air. I do sometimes remove it, if I'm completely honest, because with Cinematic Studio Strings, the moment you boost the top end, you also boost the hiss, you know, which is it's fine. Yeah, it's not a massive issue, but depending on the context, it can become quite audible. Yeah. Then I've got Galfos, which sometimes I do also bypass. But as you can see, I'm kind of recovering and taming by 15%, and then adjust the brightness, because that's what this plugin does. Yeah, it tends to add quite a bit of brightness. And finally, this plugin, which is kind of a bit of a... I'm not exactly sure what it does. I think it sounds a bit like a chorus to my ears, but... It kind of adds a bit of bigness, I think, to the strings. I think is most commonly used on vocals, yeah, to kind of create a vocal doubling sort of effect. And you can also use it to create a wider stereo spread, essentially. So it's an interesting plugin, and I've been experimenting with it. As you can see, I'm not like doing anything crazy with it, but I think it does add something. So if I isolate the string, same thing as before, you see what I mean? You see what it does? It's on, off. I mean, it's very subtle, but... So this is about halfway through. Let me demonstrate something. You kind of get the impression, I think, of not just a bigger stereo spread, but also like a bigger ensemble of instruments. So it's a bit of an interesting plugin. Have a listen. You see? Actually, let me make it more. So this was about... I mean, I'm not gonna save it or anything, so that I shouldn't worry about that. So let me just boost the mix knob a bit so that you can hear it more clearly. All right. So we were about here before. If I bypass. And if you don't like what it does to the bass, you can also exclude it, kind of. So that you can basically kind of widen just the top end, just the strings. I don't know. It's an interesting plugin. And I think I like what it does. We can put it back to where it was before. So I think it was about here and about here. Yes, something like that. Okay, cool. And also to create a similar kind of effect, I'm using a couple of reverbs. Nothing too crazy. We've got a long one, which is something we've seen in my template before. I took off a bit of the bass response within the plugin itself, just so that we didn't have that, you know, muddy kind of rumble happening at all times. And also I pulled back a bit of the reverb time. I think I had it at 2.15. Something I should say though is that a template is a template here. I'm tweaking this stuff all the time. So something that may work for a project might not work as well for another project. Let's say I was gonna do something, I don't know, that is to be played in a more legato-ish kind of style, or a slower piece of music. It would be fine to, go back to the same reverb time that we had before. So we've got that one just to smooth out the tails of all the instruments. It can be particularly helpful when you use instruments from different developers. And then we've got this other one, Tight Live, which is basically like a really small room, essentially, just to give it a little bit more early reflections. And that's basically because I switched off the room mics. So to bring back a little bit of that bigness, I'm using this instead, but in a more controlled environment. I don't think it makes a huge difference if I switch them off. It's just a subtle kind of thing, but I think it does add something. And if I don't have it on, I do miss it. So once again, let me isolate the strings, and I'm gonna turn off the reverbs. On. Off. Right, so it's pretty subtle, but it works. And since we've been talking about reverbs across the template, I've got the usual stuff. Yeah, I've got a couple of instances of Cinematic Studio, no, what is this? Jesus Christ, all these plugins start with Cinematic. Cinematic Rooms Professional. We've got, like a medium stage, a large one. Then I have the Boston Hall, which I don't really use, to be honest. I just like the sound, that's why it's still here, but I don't really use it. The Score stage is my main reverb, is the one we were talking about before, 1.85. And then we've got some other ones. We've got this Taj Mahal, which I really, really like for solo instruments, and it's got a very long tail. Yeah, and then we've got other types. We've got like a chamber reverb that can be useful for drums, let's say. We've got a plate, also from Cinematic, Jesus Christ, sorry, Seventh Heaven. We've got, this plate reverb, and then this other one, which is something I only discovered recently, and I really love what it does. This replica, I think it comes with some of the Native Instruments complete bundles. This replica reverb is really, really awesome. It's not a reverb, sorry, it's a delay. It's really, really awesome, and it does, I think it sounds to me like a bit, I don't know, like something in between like a chorus and a delay and a reverb. I don't know. It's quite hard to describe. And I oftentimes like to use it in conjunction with, the long reverbs, right? Like the Taj Mahal preset. So I think I do have an example here. Let me just find that. I think I do have it. I have it on the Daddy. Oh, the Daddy. It's really awesome, isn't it? So if I turn it off, I mean, it goes on forever, but if I turn both of them off, you see what they do. They do a lot. I should also say that it's quite easy to go overboard with these things, with the super long tails, because they're exciting, right? They kind of make everything sound better. But if you go overboard with it, you can easily ruin the music with reverbs. That's been the strings, essentially. Percussion is the same. It's quite literally the same instruments as last year. We've got Noir, which I basically still love. Use as my main piano. So yeah, I mean, very nimble, very, very nice. It has a bit of jazzier kind of sound. But I also still love using some more normal stuff, like this felt piano from Spitfire Audio. I really love it for single lines, like this one, for example. And for some of these mallets, usually I go with Cineperk and the default mix. That sounds fine to me, but from time to time I do still like to use the close and tight, or maybe just the room mics, if I want to push something further back. So let me just isolate a few stems just so you can hear the overall sound. So I realize it's not for everybody. Yeah, it's a bit of a drier kind of mix. I'm barely using any reverb, actually. I think I'm not using anything. I have a little bit of it on the harp and Celeste mallets. They've got nothing. So that's what it is, really. Ensemble patches. I think we should talk about those. I don't use them like most people use them. I realize I don't know how to use ensemble patches, essentially. No, I mean, the way I use them is usually to kind of add a little bit of body to my regular, solo instruments. But I think this, if I open everything up, you'll see that I don't make like a heavy use of them. Yeah, I just kind of use them in specific moments of the piece to kind of bring something out or to make it a little bit more beefy. The ones that I tend to grab more often are usually woodwinds, but from time to time I do use brass and strings as well. For example, strings. I told you before that I wasn't particularly keen on the spiccatos, right? So what I like to do is layer them from sometimes, with its own ensemble patches, so from Cinematic Studio Strings. And as you can see, this panel doesn't offer you the same view as before, right? Where you can tweak each individual mics. So you're stuck essentially with the default mix, which does include the mains, but also you get the other instruments as well. So, the violins, the violas, the cellos, the basses. And whenever, let me just isolate this actually so you see what I'm talking about. And whenever you engage it, you get this huge, basically, string section. If I want to make it even bigger, I like to use Albion, which is, this library has been recorded in Air Studios in London, which is a huge sounding room. By itself, I'm not like super keen on the sound, but I don't know. Like, I think it does something to Cinematic Studio that is kind of difficult to replicate in any other way. I don't think I could achieve the very same thing with reverb alone. So this is just Albion 1. All right, and if I isolate the strings, the violins, together with the ensemble patches, you see what I'm talking about. This part in particular, so it's not just louder, it's also bigger. If I isolate this section, and I remove the ensemble patches, you see that the strings kind of disappear a bit. They just sound very thin, and it's nice to have something to give them that body that you need for specific moments in the piece. And then, the other stuff is normal stuff that I have been using for a long time. Mostly Hollywood winds. I think it's a very nice layer, and this is probably one of the most useful libraries I have, if I'm completely honest. These Hollywood Winds, very old library, but I think it aged like fine wine. You know, it's very nice to use by itself. Yeah, whenever you're feeling lazy, you don't wanna orchestrate the whole woodwind section. You can grab one of these, sounds great, but you can also use it as a layer for your normal woodwinds to kind of make them a little bit more beefy. You know, kind of make them stick out. And then for the brass, I mean, Cinematic Studio Brass, the default ensemble patch. The only thing I do to it is I mute the trumpets because I don't want them in there. And this other one, this is just so great. This is one of my favorite in general, is the Bones and Timpani Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit. Having that timpani layer kind of gives that punch that you need for a moment like that. So it's very great. We've got other stuff in here, but we can talk about those later. And then we've got some new instruments from Ample. We'll talk about those later as well. Drum kits. This is also new. I bought a couple of things. I've finally got Damage 2. Yeah, believe it or not, that's coming from me. Damage 2. I freaking love it. You know, it sounds phenomenal, I think. But I didn't have it for too long, so I didn't have much time to experiment with it. But it's great. And in this project, I kind of experimented with the idea of creating like I don't know, like a massive drum kit sound. So we've got these regular drums. Which is the studio drama from Native Instruments. Yeah, this is my own mix. I just pulled the init patch, which is basically everything default. Just kind of messed with it a bit, you know, some of the mics and the panning. I muted the room and the overheads because this is huge. These drums were recorded in Teldex, which is the same stage where Orchestral Tools records all that stuff. So, actually, I mean, I don't know why I'm trying to describe the sound when I could play it to you. Man, that sounds so good. Maybe I should have it on. I'm reconsidering. But no, like to have a nice punchy sound, I think, you know, this mix mostly works. But the moment you add damage to it, it kind of... Yeah, that's nasty. Kind of makes it like a... I don't know, makes it sound like a drum kit on steroids or something. Yeah, that's it, really, for drums. I mean, I don't use much else. I've got other things in here. I tried messing with some of the loops just because I had them. I was excited about trying the library, but I mostly kind of experimented with the default, you know, patch, you know, the Armageddon ensemble. And mixing-wise, what I've done to the drum kit is just a bit of gain, bit of gain staging, a bit of EQing, nothing too crazy there. Then a bit of compression, not much really. Let me show you. Just a couple of decibels. Oh, let me mute this. Armageddon. And then this one, I freaking love this one. This is amazing. I also just bought this one. This is a plugin from SoundToys, very famous plugin. Yeah, everybody uses it in the pop world, really. And it's basically like a saturation plugin, but it adds so much to the drums, you know. Let me show you with and without. Listen to the bass drum specifically. Man, I love this. It's so great. And I was a bit conservative here because of, I didn't feel like it was necessary to drive it too much, but you could potentially drive it quite a bit. Man, I love that. Obviously kind of makes it louder as well, so there's that. But it's fantastic. It's a fantastic plugin, yeah, for saturation. And I've been experimenting with this plugin on brass as well, just kind of make it more buzzy. So this is the brass. Let me bypass. I mean, once again, you could be less conservative and just go for it, and it would still sound pretty good. The rest of the mix, I mean, like, it's a different mix. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm not doing anything completely mental. Yeah, actually, let me try and switch everything off. Yeah, just to demonstrate that it's not gonna make like a huge difference. Most of the sound and the mix I try to achieve within the orchestration and the programming. So I'm gonna mute everything. I mean, yeah, you can probably tell that these are good libraries, they sound good. They don't need anything particular to be done. Frankly, I think I might have done a little bit too much to it, just for the sake of showing you stuff and so on and so forth. I think I might have gone a little bit overboard with it. But sometimes, when I'm working on a project, I do end up muting some of these plugins, like Galfos, for example. That's often the first one to go, and reverbs as well. I do mess with reverbs all the time. I don't seem to be able to make up my mind on brass, whether I want them to sound large or kind of, a little bit more laid back. But in this template, I think reverb is probably the effect that is most noticeable, yeah? If I do boost it on brass, for example, you do start to notice it. I like it, I do like it, but at the same time, it may not fit every scenario. Actually, for the sake of experimentation, let me just try and isolate this together with the drums that sound a little bit more closer to you, and let me push the reverb on brass. I'll show you what I was trying to, explain before, how it's difficult sometimes to blend some of the more orchestral instruments with the regular instruments like a drum kit. So here's a drum kit and brass. Right? So this mix for brass with a big reverb, sending to 0 decibels, essentially would be your standard kind of mix, something more similar to what I had last year. But it doesn't necessarily fit within the context of a band. Actually, let me just grab some guitars as well. We do have guitars in this piece. And let me pull back the reverb to where it was before, which was around here, I think. So it's fine. I think it does feel pretty good, but at the same time, it's still quite large compared to, literally just the band, yeah? I mean, if I put the band together with the strings, which tend to have a more direct kind of sound, like we talked about before, with just the spot mics and a little bit of the room, you see that the strings tend to blend a little bit better with the band. Yeah, maybe. same goes with the woodwinds. Yeah, so I think that was a pretty clear examples. And for guitars, I mean, I'm a guitarist, so I don't use plugins because I'm too proud. Yeah, I try to record everything myself. But I don't know if anybody's interested in this, but I tend to use Universal Audio stuff. Those are great. These Marshall Plexi, link the 2 channels on the Marshall. It works exactly like the actual one. Why is it not allowing me? Okay, like so, and then you just kind of crank it up. Yeah, but otherwise I think that should be about everything. I mean, choir is the same as usual. I don't use it very often. What I think we can do is just kind of isolate a couple of stems here and there, and then just kind of jump into the empty template. We can play a couple of sounds and call it a day. Yeah, what do you think? Cinematic Studio solo strings. We haven't talked about those, but it's quite literally the same treatment as these other ones, just the close and the room. They work really great, obviously, in conjunction with the regular strings, like what we have over here. The way I achieve these super realistic lines is a bit of a cheat on the ethnic instruments. I quite literally use the phrases and I tweaked them a bit. As you can see, I bounced it in place over here, the arrow. And I kind of stretched it, to match the tempo that we've got in the piece. But also this other one on the Daddy is something in between. Like the beginning of the phrase is a pre-recorded one, and then it ends with something I programmed in myself. You will never ever be able to create that little crescendo going into the very lively kind of vibrato that the flute does over here. You will never be able to do that with a virtual instrument. So that's why it's so great to have, pre-recorded phrases. And I bought these libraries myself just because I feel like they've got a good bunch of pre-recorded phrases and nice articulations and stuff. And I don't know, like they sound very good as an effect to me, more so than having these instruments for specific lines that you want to give them or program yourself, like what we've got over here at the beginning on the arrow. That's that's okay, I think, but obviously it does not sound as nice as this line, which was pre-recorded. Even with the artifacts, from time stretching and stuff, this is still like miles better than the previous phrase. But yeah, I like these instruments overall, and obviously it goes without saying that they play very nicely together. So let me play a little bit of all the ethnic, Chinese instruments. right? Programming these lines, you know, does take a bit of time, yeah, just to get the articulations that you want. So we play the strings for the next section. What else can we play? The brass. This is actually really nice, this passage over here. So you'll see that for solo moments, I still like to use my sample modeling in combination with Cinematic Studio Brass. That's the sound. And for the occasional super loud moments, I do sneak in the, you know, angry brass. While for strings, I tend to use Cinematic Studio strings most of the time, except for lead lines, which I tend to usually grab Vista, and sometimes Vista and Pacific, or just Pacific. So that's Vista and Pacific. But if I'm completely honest, like the vast majority of my projects tend to be literally just Vista. Yeah, and the reason is it's not because I don't like Pacific, because I do. Generally speaking, Pacific tends to sound, it's a larger ensemble, yeah, and was recorded in a larger room. At least that's how it sounds to my ears. It doesn't tend to fit quite as well, I don't know, maybe like an underscore or like a string arrangement for the song, you know, like having a smaller ensemble is much more realistic, generally speaking, because that's what you get when you record the strings, you know, with a band, essentially. You know, you don't get this huge ensemble of instruments. So Pacific is great, but has a more symphonic kind of sound. And for much of the same reason, really, I tend to use the Cinematic Studio strings, legatos, for accompaniment. Yeah, let's say we've got like a flute lead on the top with some nice pads, string pads underneath it. For those, I'm almost never gonna grab Vista or Pacific because they're too lively. Here's a nice one, here's a nice layer. For this one I've used quite literally just Pacific, and we've got violins and cellos in octaves with a viola doing something in between. Right, so it's very nice, but it's a very symphonic sound. Let me put it together with the brass, because we've got the French horn over the top as well. Actually, I have woodwinds as well. So yeah, I mean, that's it really. It's mostly the same stuff as last year, but it's been revisited, yeah, to kind of fit not just this different aesthetic that I find myself liking more and more, but also fit my more recent needs. Because this year I've been working on a lot of less of music for film and TV and, you know, this huge film score stuff, and more like songs, essentially having these kind of orchestral arrangements on top of a song. That's what I've been doing. Let me just kind of close this one and open a fresh... Oh, actually, no, let's not do that because we're not done. I forgot to talk about the output because everybody asks me all the time, what do I do for the mastering? Like it's some kind of, I don't know, voodoo or something. So let me just kind of mute everything, and then we're gonna A/B with and without the mastering effects. So let me be completely honest. I think what does most of the work is the EQ. Yeah, is this one. If I mute this, you see that it does a lot. Because it's targeting specific problematic stuff, yeah, which is the low end, low mids, I should say, mad. That's kind of the way it is, really. Whenever you're composing this style of music, you know, you often have this problem. And then kind of opening up a little bit of the top end, that I can't live with. Yeah, this EQ, yeah, that's the one plugin I can't sacrifice. Not necessarily these settings. You'll see whenever we open my empty template, I don't have anything on the mastering because I tend to do it per project. And then, like, if I had to pick another one, would probably be this one, the compressor. But then again, it depends on the project, because if you're doing something slow, kind of lush, and that has to be dynamic, the compressor is gonna kill all of that. Yeah, there's no way you can make the music dynamic if you use compression, even at 2 dB. But as you've seen, as we talked about before, we've got different stages of compression across the template. So it's not really fair for me to say that it's just 2 dB. In reality, it would be more like 6. And of course, this could be truer for some instruments than others, but this does a lot, I think. And it's always the same settings, generally speaking: compressing 2 decibels, you know, auto release, and attack of 30 milliseconds, so that it doesn't cut out all of the transients, because we still need those, yeah. And then, of course, Ozone 10, which is my usual stuff. I'm still, as you can see over here, for the top, MC Orchestral. That's my preset, which I use as a starting point, usually. The one thing I don't touch is the EQ and this one, but I do touch a bit of the imager sometimes, and the exciter. Actually, this is a completely new one, because I think I used to have quite a bit more top end, but I don't know, like, I was getting tired of that kind of mix, so I kind of switched some things around. And then maximizer and limiter, which are basically compressors. So that's the mix bus. What I think I want to try and mute each single effect that we've got going on. We're not going to mute the gains, obviously, because that's, you know, volume is the most important part of mixing, yeah? If it's not the same balance across the template, it's just not going to work, really. But we're not going to mute the gains, but we can mute the rest of the effects and see how much all this impacts, you know, the music, and if it does at all. That's sample modeling. Actually, I think for this test to work, I'll have to have at least 7/7 on sample modeling, because it cuts the volume, really. I think it's pretty good. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, it could be better, right? That's the reason why we do mix it, but it's passable. I don't know if it's gonna come across this way, where I don't know what you guys think. And of course, there are some problematic areas, like the muddy low mids, you know, because that's always problematic. So that's that little bit of EQ would enhance the music quite a bit. But generally speaking, I think even unmixed, you know, I think it's passable. I don't think the mix is enhancing the music by like 1,000%. You know, that's what I'm saying. The biggest difference is probably volume, really, and clarity, of course, because the mixed version is much sounds much more clear, more defined. It has more top end, it's nicer. But if I was to give this to a client, you know, the unmixed version, I don't think they'd be mad. You know, I think they'd be okay with it. I'm not saying that I would. You don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that you should be lazy and not mix your music. But what I'm saying is that you should let orchestration and arranging and, you know, all the rest kind of take care of most of the issues, yeah? And let mixing or mastering or whatever, you know, being the final stage, you know, the polishing stage, where you can kind of bring your music to life a little bit. All right, cool. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna close this, grab the empty template, and then break it down from the top to bottom. I'll see you in a bit. All right, I'm back. So starting from the top, the choir, for that I used a couple of things. I still have Oceania 2 from Performance Samples. Sounds great, but I don't use it much. Not because I don't like it, but simply because it's not the kind of music I write often. We've got Stretsov, Choir Essentials. Passing out there, almost passed out. And I bought these myself. I should say, I forgot to mention at the beginning. That's a big problem, isn't it? Everybody's gonna think I'm biased because they give me stuff. I did get some stuff for free in the past, and I do regret taking them, actually. Just for the sake of full transparency, I just kind of I don't want you guys to think that I'm biased, but I bought these myself. So moving on, we've got Cinematic Studio Woodwinds. I think it's the best woodwind library easily out there, you know. Particularly love the flutes. Love it. And I mean, it's got a whole bunch of articulations, piccatos. Actually, I should open this so that you can see what I'm doing. Get your shit together, Matt. That's why I don't do reviews, by the way. I'm clearly terrible at it. So moving on, the alto flute. I really like the alto flute as well. I use it just as often. It's beautiful, isn't it? And then what we've got over here is the bass flute from BBC. I never use this, but I have it in there just in case. It's okay, really. It's okay, nothing spectacular. I mean, I wish they did the legato, that's all. Then moving on, we've got the oboes. They're lovely. But for my type of writing, I tend to grab the English horn more often than the oboe. So, what should we play? What I like the most about Cinematic Studio Woodwinds is that you can record enable them, all of them, and just play basically solo lines at the same time, and it sounds nice. Brass. For brass, we've got our trusty sample modeling. That's been following us for so long now. My favorite instrument in general is the French horn, yeah. And I love to play this patch, yeah. The The first solo French horn from sample modeling. I'm not sure about this plugin though. This one I added for this. I think I kind of liked it before within the mix, but I don't know, by itself kind of adds a bit of a weird chorus, I think, effect. I'm not sure if I like it still. So that's a French horn. Terms of treatment, can open this. I can show you. Basically, I turned everything off. I'm not loving this one though. Yeah, let's just leave that off for now. Everybody asks me about this one all the time. So these are the curves. You can take a screenshot if you like. It's nothing fancy really. Most of the time it's just an M kind of shape. You cut out all of the top end and the bottom end, just so that you can create more of a sense of distance. Yeah. And then here's what we've got in terms of reverb. I just pushed a bit of the early reflections. The very low frequencies, that's what these little knob does. I just usually turn it off. And that's it, really. Sometimes, depending on the project, I run it maybe like so. Not like 100% wet, and it can sound pretty good still. So let me show you. Moving on, we've got trumpets from sample modeling as well. We're gonna turn off the micro shift plugin, which I wasn't loving for the French horn today. It's very nice and very expressive. And once again, here are the settings. It's very similar to the French horns. Basically, everything's off. I just messed a bit with the panning, I think, just to kind of have each instrument sit in a slightly different position. And these are the curves. I'm just cutting quite a bit of the top end. You can take a screenshot if you like. And then same preset as the French horn, but something that's different is these two parameters. The very low frequencies I boosted, yeah, quite a bit. I mean, all the way actually. And the early and late reflections, I kind of pulled them back a bit. If we record, enable all of them together, they're gonna sound like this. Maybe we can record something and create a harmony. I think that's the most beautiful part of sample modeling, you know, these blends. They're so realistic, you know. Then we've got cinematic studio brass, which I love and use very often, particularly for the shorts. I use just as often the A4 patch. I love the legato in this one. I mean, it's fine for slower moving lines. For anything faster than that, I tend to just program it. Yeah. Then alongside cinematics to the brass, I love using Angry Brass. All right. So that's Angry Brass. Here in the middle, I've got a bunch of utility stuff, no output, click, audio reference, and something for sketching, which is just literally just a piano. Okay, so this is new, I think. Synth and sound design. Yeah. From time to time, I like to just browse some patches and see if I find something that I like. I use some of them sometime. This is probably the one I like to use the most. It's really quite amazing. It has a very Zimmer-esque kind of sound, I think. And some of the ones I like the most are these, because they kind of create some very interesting textures. These from... what is this library even? Kinetic Metal. It's not something you would use in every project though. Moving on, some of the damage kits. This is the default one, I think, Armageddon. I changed the mix a bit because the way it comes up, it's a bit too roomy, but this is fantastic. I mean, this is just an incredible sample library. So what I think I will do at some point is kind of, I mean, keep the kits, yeah, but also into my normal, regular kind of percussion stems. Then I've got the studio drummer, the one I was playing before. I mean, yeah, pardon my terrible, finger drumming. It's a great library. And for lighter stuff, I like to use this other one, the 60s, the Abbey Road 60s drummer. Yeah, so that's drums. For brushes, I use some patches from Swing, which are great. That's all it does. Yeah, you press a button, it does all the work for you. Just the way I like it. These are all new, yeah? The Ample sounds. They're really fantastic instruments, but I much prefer them for effects. See what I mean? It sounds fine for leads, but also you cannot really control dynamics with the mod wheel, which is something I'm not really used to. You can control expression though, so that helps a bit. But the other articulations are great, and there's a whole bunch of them you can choose from. So they've got so many. Grace up, grace down, pentatonic. This is really nice. But my favorite part of the library has been all of the licks and phrases. How great is that? It's very inspiring. Even if they're phrases, you could use these more as an effect. The only problem with these is that they're all, as far as I know, they're all in E minor, yeah, and they're not like time. You would have to do some audio manipulations to make it fit within the project, but that's fine, that's not necessarily a massive issue. So that's one. This is the second flute I bought, the Daddy flute. I mean, to be honest, I bought this. I think they sound quite similar. They've got very similar articulations as well. I slightly prefer the sound of the other one, but I bought this one as well just so I could have more phrases. Even if you don't end up using the whole phrase, you could just grab the beginning, like I showed you before, right? You could just grab the beginning of the phrase or something in the middle and kind of mix it up with something that you play yourself. You see what I mean? So I let it play the beginning of the phrase, and then I play the second half of the phrase myself. So you can kind of play with it. Then I got this other one, which is a harp, essentially. It's very nice. I mean... it's a very nice sounding harp in general. And then what I've got over here is just same old stuff, you know, some strings from Middle East and the oud. And this is also new. I have done a video using this library last year, actually, during Christmas. And it's very nice. This is V Horns by Acoustic Samples. It's very nice. And when I need a more big band-like kind of sound, which is pretty much never the case. Yeah, I just don't do that kind of music. I just usually layer it, you know, the trumpets, the sample modulating trumpets, the trombones, and these saxes. I layer them with Project Sam Swing. Is a bunch of other patches that I use from time to time. The upright bass, that's also something I use sometimes. Let's see if there's something particularly interesting. This is nice. The fingered dulcimer, also from the original labs. Hammered dulcimer as well. This is also quite nice. Yep. And I believe I used this patch actually in the template demo. Going into the ensemble patches is the same. It's quite literally the same stuff as last year. You know, for the effects, I'm just gonna skip all of them. These are useful effects, but you don't write this kind of music every day. Runs and texture, Hollywood winds and cine strings. So basically, same thing as last year with a couple of libraries I made myself. Once again, same thing as last year. I haven't changed anything. So Hollywood winds, and then some stuff from Albion 1. We talked about these early today. I don't think, is there any need for me to play these? Ensemble brass. Once again, same thing as last year. And the other patches you see are more niche, you know, like horns and trumpets in octaves. I never use these. I could get rid of them, to be honest. I think what you'll see later on is probably this template getting a little bit leaner on the orchestral kind of side, because a lot of this is quite redundant, really. There are so many patches I don't use. There are some really great patches in here, don't get me wrong. Even like some of my favorite ones. This one, the horns and the low strings. But I don't know, like they're a little bit gimmicky, you know, so I don't use them quite as often as the super reliable ones. These are very case by case scenario. Cinematic Studio Strings, I love using this one actually, and I love to layer it with the whisper sustains from Performance Samples Pacific. It's a really great sound. And here's another of my favorite patches. All of these Albion patches have a lot of great low end. For example, if you play it together with the brass, sounds like this. It is a great sound. The only problem I have with it is the really bumpy legatos, you know. I mean, I can't give them too much of a hard time considering how old this library is. But it is a bit of a problem, so you know, it's okay. Like, it's not something you'd hear it in the context of a mix. But once again, like for exposed kind of lines, I would probably grab something else. So moving on to percussion, it's again, same things as last year. I don't think I have changed anything in this folder. Something I've said many times, my favorite thing about this library is the fact that you can adjust the release. Yeah, I use Cineperk for everything, essentially. Cineperk for everything. I use the Cinehubs, you know, once again, gets the job done. And being recorded in the same space as Cineperk, of course, it works fantastic with Celeste. Moving on to pianos, we've got Noir, which is my favorite piano. And sometimes, with Replica as well, for more atmospheric kind of things. I mean, I tend to get lost playing these. It's such a beautiful sound. I love this. I can't even describe how much I love, you know, this library. I love it so much, in fact, that kind of makes me not want to use anything else. And finally, we've got strings. Which is our usual cinematic studio strings. And alongside Vista and Pacific. Probably for legato stuff, as I said before, my favorite is still Vista. It's a really great library. So that's it, really. That's the bulk of my template. And I realized this is going to be a bit of a different video because my template walkthrough tends to be a little bit more detailed, right? But I feel like I've been repeating myself so much, so much. I don't know, like if there's any point for me to kind of go through each single patch and just play them and say what I think. As each year progresses, it has been increasingly more difficult to keep track of what it is that I've talked about already and what I haven't. I don't think there's much point in me just going through every patch. And again, for those of you who enjoy the sound and want to give it a spin, you can grab my template from my Patreon, alongside, of course, the project files of the demo I showed you at the beginning of the video today. So that's it. That's everything for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.